My name's Dr. Klepak. I don't recognize anybody. Do I recognize anybody in here? No, I don't think so. I teach in biology. And come on in. Yep. Here, take these. I want those. It's good. You guys are making me feel like I'm not the latest one in class. This is the second year I've taught this class. I taught it in the fall of 2017. I will say this, that this class is going to be significantly different than it was in the fall for a number of reasons. Any new class, particularly a class like this, that is not some like out-of-the-box class. You know, if you take like a Gen Chem classes haven't really changed over the last several decades. There's not like a biochemistry of food textbook with slides and stuff like that you can find. So this is a class that I'm making from scratch. And every time that you're making a class from scratch, like the first 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of revisions. So hopefully this will be a better version of what was a great class that first time. And then secondly, maybe more importantly, this class is about food, the biochemistry of food. And if you're not already aware, food is seasonal, right? Food doesn't just magically appear in your grocery store. And so I had done some activities the first time around that were very dependent upon the food that was growing in Maine in the fall, which is a lot. There's a lot in the fall. That's harvest time. And we don't have harvest time now in the spring, but that's okay. There's still a lot of interesting things to talk about at this time of the year. And so I'm hoping to try to incorporate some of that seasonality into the class for you guys to make it interesting. Biochemistry of food. In a little bit, I'm going to have you, after I sort of describe the class a bit, I'm going to have you guys give me some feedback. You're going to answer some questions about what you think biochemistry of food means before I start getting too deep down the rabbit hole of my own brain. But in general, broadly, it's kind of a little bit of what you see here in front of you on the screen. So we've got a banana, right? And when you think of a banana, you probably think of maybe that food that you don't like because you don't like the texture, or maybe that food that you grab quickly on the way to practice, or something like that. Maybe you've heard that it has a lot of potassium in it, and potassium is good for you in some vague sense. You know that. Maybe you know they're sweet a little bit. Yeah, the biochemistry of food, we're going to be looking at quantifying the chemical composition of foods, the transformations. Yes, ma'am?
How does a banana change when it's not ripe? It is ripe. Are the numbers different?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, and I'm hoping to have a whole week dedicated to that kind of a question, right? So towards the second half of the semester, so the first half we're going to focus on macronutrients, just understanding what it is that's in food. What is a sugar? What's a fat? What's a protein? What are vitamins and minerals, like micronutrient versus macronutrient? And then we'll look at the biochemical changes that food undergoes, both in raw food, which is exactly the question you're asking. I have a whole week dedicated to that. And then the biochemical changes that happens in cooked foods and what that means. All right. So yes, I'm going to try to answer that question for you if you'll be patient. Will take about a month and a half to get there. But so right. But exactly, what was your name?
Ariana.
Ariana. Yeah. The question that Ariana is asking right now? That's the kind of question I want you to be thinking about. And not just in this class. This class is like a little doorway to help you begin to ask those kinds of questions. But I want you to be able to ask those questions of your food from now on, the rest of your life. When you go to a store and you're going to buy food, you are a little bit more informed about what that food is doing for you, what you're getting, what you can do with that food, what are the potentials, and what are the drawbacks. So I want to look at, I hope to look at additives to food. The sad thing about it is this class really should be a 2-semester class, right? And I'm kind of seeing it that way because I taught it in the fall and I get to take it again, albeit up here at the podium, with you for the second semester. You don't get to do that, so I'm going to have to repeat a lot. But a class like this, you could dedicate your whole life to this, right? So it's a 100 level class, a survey class for non-science majors. Are there any science majors in here? There shouldn't be. Yeah. Oh, you are? Yeah. That's cool. We're glad that you're here. I didn't mean that you shouldn't be here. Oh, cool. Great. Yeah. The class is maybe one of the only lab sciences on campus that's made for non-science majors. So I'm assuming that most of you are not scientists, right? And so I'm gonna try to always keep that in mind. You'll have to slow me down because I am a scientist when I'm assuming something that I shouldn't be assuming, right? You're gonna help me with that, okay? Okay. So in general, after this class, I want you to be able to look at these kinds of numbers and have a sense of what that means. Vitamin B6, what the hell's that? You know, B6, what happened to 1 through 5? And A, where did that go? Does that mean well, I think we all know there's a vitamin C. You've heard of that, right? Is 7 grams of fructose good or bad? What is fructose? Fiber, that seems ambiguous. What is fiber? What does that even mean? Like those kinds of questions, I want you to be able to ask them and then at least have the tools to answer them, all right? I'm not expecting you to be an expert food scientist after this class, but I want you to at least have the language in place, the cognitive skills to be able to address those questions. Below that, all right, so food, you know, ostensibly teaching you about the biochemistry of food is my primary goal, but it's really not. There are, you know, there's a banana under the peel, so to speak, and the sort of deeper goal that I have is just to be able to teach you about science. I mean, you can't call yourself, you know, a liberally educated individual from an elite liberal arts college without having a fair fluency in the common everyday language of science, like understanding what science is, how the scientific process works, what the scientific mind is, how to use that scientific process, why it's so powerful, why it has transformed our society so radically just in the last couple hundred years. So that's the deeper goal. I'm just using biochemistry of food to get you to understand what science is, all right? And that's going to be always even further in the back of my mind, trying to make sure that I'm conveying that to you. We're going to do some things that are going to be showing you the motions of science and the process of it throughout the semester. And then this is more of an onion than a banana, because there's another layer inside of that. The deepest layer is a layer that's in every single class I ever teach. And it's kind of to the core of what my teaching philosophy is. And this is that if I'm presumably teaching leaders of tomorrow and today, if you guys are really the leader, if I believe the hype and you guys are leaders, I don't want to be responsible for training any leader that I don't want to follow. This isn't about politics or something like that. That's not what I mean. But I want to feel like you are living your lives in a way, it's just like in the very most essence, the simplistic manner that I can believe in. And that means, are you taking care of your own personal health and well-being before anything else? It should be your highest priority. I think sometimes that's hard for young people to understand. It was for me when I was your age. When I was sitting in those chairs, I was taking 23 credits of biochemistry, and I had a coffee shop and another business, and I was in a band, and I never slept, ever. I never slept. And I drove myself kind of insane. I got a lot done, but it wasn't good for my health. And all that productivity, what did that actually achieve in the end of the day, except sort of making me a more stressed out person at that age, right? So I want you to learn how to make your own health and well-being a priority. This class is ideally tuned to that, right? Because we're talking about biochemistry of food. Food is one of the pillars of a healthy individual, right? There's more than just that, though. So you all have these little packets I handed out. I really strive to be paperless, and I'm sure that, what was your name? Will. I'm sure that Will could probably help me make some app. I know there are already apps that do it, that track the kind of stuff that this paper thing does. I kind of like the analog aspect of it. I'm gonna have you day to day track how many hours of sleep you get. Because over the years that I've done this, I do this with every single class, I've discovered this kind of appalling, but not sadly shocking truth. I just admitted my own truth. I didn't sleep when I was your age. Maybe like 3 nights of the week, I was up all night, like studying and whatever, so that I could do other things during the daylight hours. It's a bad habit that took a real notch out of my health and well-being. It took years for me to really build a firm foundation once again, solid foundation. So I know a lot of people on this campus don't have very healthy sleep habits. And you may have control over it, or some people feel like they don't. They feel like they struggle with insomnia and clinical insomnia. The first step is like recognizing that problem. And the way to do that is just to monitor your sleep habits. Like, when did you actually fall asleep that night? And then when did you get up? And then I also have you track your stress levels on a scale of 1 to 5. And I'm going to tell you that I would like the ideal to be at about a 3 or below. All right? There's no like bad grade, good grade associated with it if you're riding at a 5. I just taught a Jan Plan Human A and Human Anatomy and Physiology. My top grade in that class had all 5s for the last week. And she got an A in the class, right? So it's not tied to your grade. It's just a tool for you to monitor what your stress level is, okay? And I'll tell you this, that in the fall I taught a class called the Anatomy and Physiology of Yoga and Meditation. And in that class they did the same thing, and then we did an experiment where they had to measure their cortisol levels, their stress hormone. They measured their stress hormone at the beginning after like 10 minutes of meditation. And then I started shooting off air horns, and I made them put on the VR goggles downstairs here and walk the 30-story plank. And then they finished walking the plank and picking up a pumpkin and having spiders crawl over them, and had to take a pop quiz over some really intense material that I just lectured on that day. Like, stressful. And we took another cortisol reading off of their saliva. And then we did 45 minutes of meditation with this meditation expert that I had brought in from New York. And we measured their cortisol recovery. And each time they had to grade their stress at each point in that experiment. And I'll tell you that to a remarkable degree of precision, a person's subjective stress score maps onto your cortisol. This isn't a class about the physiology of stress, sadly. It's interesting. But I'll tell you this, you want your cortisol down because all the bad stuff that happens to you besides an airplane crashing out of the sky on you is related to cortisol. All right. It gives you heart disease, it gives you obesity and depression, and like the list goes on and on and on. It's what gets you sick half the time. We all know this. We don't sleep and you're stressed out. You get sick. Nobody wants to get sick because then you can't do what you got to do. Keep the stress down. And I'll help you work on ways of doing that. One of the best ways is learning how to study properly, right? Coming up with study strategies. You're all here because you're smart. You didn't get into Colby and get as far as you might have gotten. There must be some freshmen, but there's got to be seniors in here too. You're mostly seniors, though. Seniors and juniors, I think. I don't think, I had like a 30-person wait list for this class. I don't think any underclassmen got in here. But you're smart, but I promise you every single person in this room, if I sat down and talked to you for 15 minutes, I could come up with ways you could study smarter or better, a better use of your time, more efficient use of your time. One of the ways, here's a little pearl, is to come to class prepared, to make the most of me when you're in class, and every teacher. Anytime, you're gonna, like seniors, you're going to go get a job somewhere. Come to the meeting prepared. When you're talking to a boss, come prepared. If you are like, you're in a business or something, you're making a venture, talking to some venture capitalists, and come prepared. Come prepared. Think ahead. I will do my absolute best to have my PowerPoints online before class. If you don't hear the material the first time from me, you can think at a higher level in class. If you've already taken some rough notes coming in, you don't have to scribble in class, right? Come prepared. It really, it's a mantra, and only like 15% of the students that I have ever actually follow that. But it is, if you can like get over yourself and rearrange the way you think about your time and actually do that, it is so powerful. So powerful. All right, I'm getting long-winded. So here is a copy of the course schedule, and I'll tell you this, that I put this on here, I was banging this out last night, and it's already changed a little. But I'm going to do my best to keep up with this. So this is found in the syllabus that's on Moodle. I'm not going to print it out. If you need to print it out, you can do that. This schedule is also in a Google Calendar that I think by now you should have all received the email invites to. The Google Calendar is also embedded right on the top of the course Moodle. That's the living document. When I have to change something around, it's going to be in there. All right? So what are we looking at? When I first put this class together, there really wasn't a text, and there still is not really a text. And so I thought it would be fun to do podcasts instead of throwing a bunch of texts of mixed level at you, right? Does anybody like podcasts in here? Hopefully. Good, cool, most of the class, beautiful. So the podcasts, don't think of them as the text as in you're listening to the podcast to like understand everything that I'm talking about in class. Think of it more as a supplement, right? So none of these podcasts are super intense, right? They're not like heavy science. It's all pop science podcasts. But it hopefully should expand the palette of interest for you in the class. These podcasts, I haven't fully rearranged them yet, and so the placement of the podcasts will change. Right now, the podcasts are invisible in the Moodle, and I will make them appear as I want you to watch them. But that's a rough outline. Because I changed the timing of the lecture topics, those podcasts will have to shuffle around a little bit. And so, as you can maybe already guess, I get long in the tooth, and so sometimes my topics bleed over, and I hope to stick to that lecture schedule. I may fall behind it a little bit, but we'll all go on that trip together. Labs are where the schedule might get a little bit more juggly. And that's because this year I'm trying to put in more field trips, and I have torn out maybe about half of the labs that we did the last time because they were either, I was too ambitious in terms of what I could expect of a non-scientist. So like half of the class wasn't successful in a lab or something like that. And I can't have that. I want most of you to actually be able to do the lab properly. Or a couple of them were just like gross or not actually that interesting. So I pulled those out, and I'm trying to put some other fun things in, some season-appropriate things as well. Okay, we're gonna. So the first half of this, if you look down here, I've got some pretty cool stuff in here. I don't know if anyone's ever done PCR before. Probably not. It's the polymerase chain reaction. It's a way for amplifying DNA. There's a guy out at Bigelow Labs out in Booth Bay who's got, he's been hired by this company. They have this smartphone PCR reader. It's super, like, cutting edge technology that's not even on the market currently, but they're like beta testing this, and I think I can get it. He said he'd be keen on us having us test it in this class, so we might do some work on GMOs with that smartphone PCR, but it's probably not going to actually be that day because I have to order some primers, DNA primers that are going to take some time to synthesize. So I'm going to have to shuffle that around, but should be a really cool activity. Some other stuff in there. We'll probably do the fermented foods that day. Has anybody had kombucha before? Yeah, okay. Well, we're all going to make kombucha. You're all going to have your own kombucha SCOBY, maybe some other stuff. We might get to make some sauerkraut, although that didn't go super well last year. Or kimchi. I don't know. Kimchi's fun. Not everybody likes it spicy. I do. We'll do some fermented foods. And what else? Then right on the midterm, the last day of the first part of the semester is that Friday before break. You'll have a midterm and lecture. And then that day, does anybody have a 12 o'clock conflict? All right. So what we'll do, what I'd like to do then, instead of lab at 1, this guy Chris Walker in the English department, he's giving a talk about this thing called the flooded McDonald's, and it's a piece of art that's going to be in the museum. He's going to talk about it for an hour at noon, and then I want to go into the museum and do an activity in the museum that day. And we should be out of here well before 4. So you'll give me an hour on the front side, and you'll probably get 2 on the back side. So that's what I'm hoping. Okay. Second side of the semester is a little bit more vague because some of these lectures haven't been made at all yet. But I only have lectures up to micronutrients even roughed out. But I'd like to talk about flavorants, the changes in raw food and cooked food, like our friend here who was asking about. And then there's this arsenic work week. Oh, man, that sounds poisonous, doesn't it? Yeah. There's a project that I want the class to work on together. I'm part of this thing called a SEPA grant. It's a grant by the NSF through a place called Mount Desert Island Biological Station that is focused on, the underlying goal is data literacy in secondary education, so high schoolers. And the goal is to have high schoolers go out and collect well water from here in Maine, and then they send it to Dartmouth, and it gets analyzed for arsenic. And then they have faculty in the state that is like a technical advisor to these high school professors. And it turns out I'm the only academically associated person that fits that here in Maine. So I have some high schoolers in Waterville High School and out at the charter high school at Goodwill Hinckley that are collecting all this data in 4 classes. And then I also, sort of as my community service, I don't know if you know this, but I live downtown in the downtown dorm. I'm one of the faculty down there. And part of my community service, I teach a class at another charter high school in Sydney. I teach a biochemistry class out there to some really smart young women. And they are also collecting arsenic data. Your role is going to be to learn about arsenic in water and in food in general, not just water, but in rice, in apples and apple cider. It's a problem in Maine. It's a real problem in Maine. You're going to get to do some background research on it, and you're going to get to help the high school students understand their data. All right, so you're going to have to learn about their data, and you're going to help them understand their data. And then we're going to have a big forum of all these high school students from around the state of Maine and you guys at the end of the semester down at the Chase Forum, and hopefully we can get a bunch of public in there or whatever, and we'll talk about arsenic. So that's the project, and I blocked off a week for us in class to be working on it in addition to what we'll be doing throughout the semester. All right, so there'll be check-ins throughout the semester, but it's like dedicated time there. And then I left the last week of the semester, I call it Student's Choice, because there's going to be a lot of stuff I don't get to. If you want me to talk about something, I'll talk about it. If you want to talk about something, you'll talk about it. If I didn't get to the other stuff that I wanted to get to, it'll push into that week. So end of the semester is a little fluid, all right? But I want it to be fun. So, okay. Yeah, lab is in Olin 314. That's our home base. I'll see you there not this Friday, but next week on Friday is our first lab. At various points throughout the semester, I'm going to somehow try to fit the group of us in the Page Commons kitchen over there, and we'll do some actual cooking as well. This is not a cooking class, sadly. I know people wanted to know how to make the perfect Béarnaise sauce. And we can talk about that, but that's probably not going to be one of our labs. But we will do some cooking, and hopefully that'll be fun. I'll have to dream up the recipes. Yeah. Okay, so in the Moodle, there's a PDF of this PowerPoint, and all subsequent PowerPoints should appear there as we go. And that's where you guys are upperclassmen, you're very familiar with Moodle at this point, but all the assignment portals are there. I am recording this right now, this lecture, and I record all of my lectures. That's not so that you can skip class and go skiing, although that sounds fun. That is so that when you are sick, you stay home in bed, and I don't have to worry about telling you what you missed, because you can just watch the lecture. So I record it, I post it, you can watch it if you miss class, all right? This is not like carte blanche to just miss class, because if you're absent a lot, I tend to take notice, and I want to make sure that you're okay, what's going on, you know. You're paying like $60,000 a year or whatever it is, supposedly, to be here, and if it was just about watching videos, you could go to some online class. You're paying for me and to be able to ask me questions in class, so come to class. Yeah. Okay, and so here's is like a point distribution breakdown. Lectures about 70% of the class, 30% lab. The midterm and the final will be roughly equal, as will this podcast blog project. What is that? So there is going to be a project for you this semester. I don't do homework. I just don't have the time to grade the homework in a class that I'm constantly prepping to stay ahead of you guys. And some homework is good. You will get some tiny amount of homework, but most of the homework is going to be just occasionally reading a paper and doing this podcast. That's really what I want you to work on. And I hope, since you are all older students, that you can be good about that schedule. Because in the past, like, students leave it till the end, and it ends up being rushed, and like they hit some kind of tech problem that's a pain in the ass. It's a bummer. If you put the time in it consistently throughout the semester and treat it like your homework, then it's going to be cool. What are you talking about, Dr. K? You're going to make podcasts, and I'll talk about what that is about in a bit. You're going to make your own. Some of the podcasts that you're going to listen to this year are from the students last year. Some of the students last year, do you guys know Zane Fields and Nick? What's Nick's last name? He's a CA in one of the dorms. I don't remember which. They made these, and what was the other guy? Wes Zabrowski. You guys know him? No, they took it last fall. They made awesome podcasts, really good ones, like almost pro grade. Get NPR to hire them. We'll listen to some of those. Hopefully you guys will find a topic that's super interesting to you, and you make a cool podcast about it. So that's your project. Once you make the podcast, you're going to write a little blurb, whatever, introducing it. That can be just some text within the podcast embedded in the class website. Or you can, if you're really feeling adventurous, you can make like a slick Spark document with photos or whatever, or like little video. I don't care how over the top you go. The more the merrier for me. Makes the website look good. But you're going to have podcasts, because the goal was to have the students with time create the content for the class for subsequent years. And that's what I want, right? I want to take the best of what you guys do and have it be the content for the following years, all right? So that's a pretty big chunk right there. I put quizzes in there as a line. I don't know how many quizzes I'm going to give you. I'll give you quizzes as it seems necessary, and they'll be mostly over the podcast, just to make sure that you're listening to them. Yeah, and then the arsenic literature project is got its own line, and then that personal log that I handed out to you. You get credit for doing it. Just like fill it out, hand it in. All right. This is the course website, Biochemistry of Food. If you like fiddling with these things, besides your blog post, you're encouraged to muck with it. I'd certainly give you some extra credit if anybody wants to make it look cooler than it does. I don't really have a lot of time for that. All right. So I talked about this. What does this even mean? So this is how you would fill it out. Sleep. I got 7.5 hours of sleep. I jogged for 25 minutes, or I did yoga for 50 minutes. By the way, I teach Ashtanga yoga every Wednesday at 5:30. If you've never done Ashtanga, you're welcome to come and join me. I do it in the Alphon Commons downtown, in the little space down there. It's not big. It's maybe smaller than this room, so if you all show up, we may have to think about where else to do it. But I do it down there every Wednesday, and there's a few committed Ashtangis that do it with me. And then, just like, what did you eat? I've had students that are like, eat cupcakes every day, or brownie, like only dessert. That is a revelation, right? It helps you see what I've had students that only eat candy. Literally, I've had, not in this class, but in a class, I had a student who only ate candy. Just, it's good to know that. It's good to know that that's your eating habits, right? So you're just keeping a rough track of it, trying to eat healthy, nutritionally appropriate meals. Athletes, are there any athletes in the room? Some athletes need more than 3 meals a day. Some do, right? And if you eat more, then you just write more in there, whatever you I don't need super detailed, just, and then monitor your stress. Okay. So, podcast themes. Last year, they picked superfoods. So I cut superfoods out, and I added it with the wild world of spices on the top. I don't know what that means. These are suggestions. Wide world of spices. There's all kinds of interesting things about the chemicals in spices and the reactions that they elicit, both in terms of gustatory, getting your saliva going, or affecting your blood sugar with cinnamon, or blah, 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 blah. Spices. I don't know. These are some other suggestions. Pros and cons of various diets or nutritional regimens. There's like a million of them out there. You know, intermittent fasting, paleo diet, Atkins, South Beach, bulletproof, veganism, Weight Watchers, on and on and on and on and on. There's all these different diets or nutritional programs. What are they doing to your body? What does that mean to be on that diet? Does it work? Does it not? What's the prevailing thought? How has thought changed over time? The thing about nutritional science is it is constantly shifting. It's constantly shifting. And the reality is that the right nutritional program is super individual dependent, right? Every person has like slightly different metabolisms and requirements and reactions to certain types of foods and distributions of foods. So that's one. Food is medicine, right? So that's a big thing. A lot of people treat food as medicine. What does that mean? Is that a valid thought, or is it not? And like, in what ways might it be valid? What are some ways that people treat food as medicine? And I gave some examples there. Foods that are supposed to be good for you, but maybe aren't. There's a lot of them, right? So I used to be a yerba mate drinker for 20 years, and I was shocked to find out. So I had a coffee shop, right? I said that already when I was in college. I was like drinking way too much coffee, and quit coffee and eventually worked my way down the teas to yerba mate. It causes oropharyngeal cancer, apparently. So, I don't know, I stopped about a year ago. Eating too much soy and estrogenic hormones. Some people say that that may be bad for you. A lot of people think soy is good for you. It is, isn't it? I don't know. Whatever. So, foods that are supposed to be good but maybe aren't. Foods that flip-flop. Scientific ups and downs on different foods. So again, this is kind of similar. What are the good and bad sides of eggs, avocados, fats, etc.? Lunch logistics. This was an esoteric one, but this was the history of food storage and transport. It's actually pretty interesting how food gets to you from wherever it was grown. It's not just magic. There's some real interesting science that may be surprising to many of you when you figure out how that happens. And it's very dependent upon the type of food. And then like very local stuff, Maine-made, the science behind foods that are specifically made in Maine. So Maine it's a cool state to teach this class because there's so much interesting food science going on in the state. Lactofermentation, cheese, liquor and wine, uncured bacon, aquaculture, Heiwa tofu. It's not going to be a part of this class, but hopefully this summer, if this grant gets funded, we will be partnering. Research at Colby will be partnering with Bigelow and this other farm, I forget the name of the farm, where they're looking at feeding algae harvested from various sources to cows to reduce methane emissions and increase nutritive content in the milk or whatever. So there'll be some ongoing research. Tons of biochemistry with that right here in the state of Maine. And interesting stuff. So these are some topics. Your job over the next, whatever, let's say I want to know by next week what your topic is. I'll put the portal up. Or we'll discuss it in class someday next week. Maybe Monday, maybe Wednesday. Yeah.
So before when you were talking about the podcast, you were saying like it was for how many of these?
Yeah. So every person you're gonna be you'll have a group, all right, and that group. So each person has to do their own podcast, but within your group of 2 or 3, maybe to fill out an odd number, that partner will be there as support for you, and you will be support for them. Because sometimes you need like recording crews or like there are aspects of it that need to be done in teams. and you'll serve each other for that purpose. Some people in the past have made one podcast between the two of them, a little bit longer one where they're talking to each other and they're doing components together. Everyone needs to have an individual contribution, because I can't have like a team where one person does 90% of it and like two people sort of do nothing. Everyone has their own podcast, but within your team, it can be one larger podcast that you put together yourselves.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's like the general
So I would like an individual to have no less than maybe like 10, 12 minutes. 12, I would say, yeah, like no less than 12. And, an individual over 20 minutes, I think that's the upper. So between like 12 and 20 minutes of like high quality, well-produced podcast, not just like somebody rambling into a microphone for 12 minutes and then put it on the web. Like I want it to sound really nice and be informative, well-researched. That's me pulling those numbers off the top of my head, but I do have guidelines in the syllabus for this, so you can look there. I defer to the syllabus on whatever I said, but I think that's what I have in there. Yes, sir.
And your group is doing the same topic?
No. The whole class is doing one of these themes. And so last year the theme was superfoods, and they did all kinds of stuff. Like one couple talked about mushrooms, different types of mushrooms. And one woman was from China, and she talked about Chinese mushrooms, and another guy was from Maine. He talked about shaga and stuff like that, and they talked about superfood aspects of that. Another person talked about CBD, right? And another person talked about, I don't know, berries, and there are all kinds of things. You can listen to them. You will be listening to some of them. So you'll pick a topic in here. If one of these themes is not interesting to you as a class, find one as a class. I don't care. It's yours. I'm suggesting these, right? They're what occurred to me. If some other theme occurs to you as a class, do that. But your goal by, do you think you can do it by Monday, or should I make it next Wednesday, a week? Is a week enough to come up with a theme? It seems like it is. Yeah. So you can meet in like whatever. Maybe we need discussion or something like that. We'll build some discussion time in, and then you'll be able to figure it out, and we'll settle on a theme sometime next week. All right. So if you need, your individual homework is to look at this list and think about, like, at home alone, like research what's interesting to you, and then we can come back. We'll have a group discussion, and then we'll vote in class. That's how we'll do it. Yes.
It doesn't have to be something on this.
Nope. If you got some idea, you can bring it to class and propose it. You'll have to pitch it. Yeah. Come prepared, pitch it. You got an idea? Bring it, and we'll all vote on it sometime next week. Does that sound good? Reasonable? So part of the reason behind this podcast is to like give you an actual skill that you can take out of this class and market. I don't know. You can like go to a job interview and say like, I'm really good with audio software. I know Audacity and blah, 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 blah. I don't know. Maybe it's useful to you. Maybe not. I don't know. But some actual skill that may make you more prepared for something down the road. Okay? Is that enough on this? I'm running out of time here. Okay. So